You are listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. Thank you for downloading and subscribing. Coming to you virtually live from high atop the historic Raleigh building in beautiful downtown Raleigh. The NC F&B takes the listener behind the scenes to tell the stories of the people that contribute to the creation of the food and beverage community of North Carolina. And now, the misfits in the dish pit, the faces of the front. They are Max Trujillo and Matthew Weiss.
Hello, and thank you for listening to the North Carolina Food and Beverage Podcast. I am your co-host, Max Trujillo.
And I am your co-host, Matthew Weiss. And today in studio, we have somebody that you're going to be hearing a lot of in the next couple of months because he is doing the crossover from hospitality into politics.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, a candidate for the state's lieutenant governor and also owner of various restaurants out in New Bern, North Carolina, we have the one, the only, career 500 hitter, Buddy Bengel.
Well, thank you all for having me, and thank you for not citing my ERA as much. Although my ERA was pretty decent, but not like a 500 batting. And I tell you,
but you're really a 500 batting average, lifetime batting average.
In my professional career, I was 1 for 2, and I tell you, I'll never forget my first at bat. I was up and. Guy comes up first pitch. He's like 94, 96, and I hadn't seen a fastball since college. And man, it got there in a hurry. I fouled off the second one, and then I tell you, he whipped off one of the nastiest sliders, and I just stared at him like, seriously? You literally just threw me a slider?
Pitcher.
I was like, come on. But that's all right. I got him in my second at bat. He threw me a first pitch fastball. I think it was like 91, 92, and I hit it right back up the middle. After that, I was done.
Right. I'm retired. I have 500. I'm good.
Hey, I'll take the ball, the bat, and let's go.
I do want to talk baseball for a really quick second because you are the owner and general manager of the Marlins as part of not the Miami Marlins, but the Coastal Plain League Marlins. And for those of you out there that are baseball fans, this is some awesome baseball. It's college kids that come on a team for the summer, and it's great baseball. The stadiums, well, at least I am a fan of the rival of yours, the Holly Springs Salamanders, because they are my team literally in my town. But the stadium's like as nice as the Durham Bulls Park, but it has maybe even less than a quarter of the seats, and it's super low key, but it's really good baseball. How did that whole league come about, and how did you get involved in that?
Well, it's a great league, and I'll talk on a couple of things. That the league started, I think, God, we're in our 23rd or 24th year in the league. We've spanned now 4 different states: North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, and Georgia. There's a lot of great minor league parks, a lot of beautiful ones. I personally love the one in Holly Springs. I think you'll be hard-pressed to find a better facility than that. They did an amazing job, and kudos to the town of Holly Springs for getting that done. But our organization started back in 2002 when I played in the league, and I'm currently the only owner that played in the Coastal Plain League.
Oh, you're like Al Davis.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I was in Petersburg, Virginia, and I'll never forget, it was a Friday night. I was pitching in Edenton, North Carolina, a town of maybe about 5,000 people, and I was so amazed. I stepped off the mound and looked up and saw roughly about 1,100 people in the stands, and I remember going, wait a minute, like 20% of your town is here.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's impressive. So I started looking at a lot of the numbers on things, and my senior year at Quinnipiac University, we had to write a senior thesis or a business plan. So I wrote mine on owning a baseball team in the Coastal Plain League. And when I got done and submitted that, I ended up getting an A on it. Afterwards, I went in with my family, and I said, this would be great for New Bern. It would be great to help revive a local economy and get people excited. New Bern had a rich history. They had a team back in the old Coastal Plain League, which is the old professional league, back in the 40s and 50s. And I thought it would be a great way to get a business part of the game that I love and stay around it. So we opened it in 2005 in New Bern. Was in New Bern for 3 seasons and then moved down to Morehead City when we were able to get a new facility built down there, and have been down there for now 10 seasons. And
again, just like Al Davis, from Oakland to L.A., you're already like
moving the team.
Yeah. Exactly, and you know, just to kind of nudge you a little bit. I mean, we are back-to-back defending Coastal Plain League champions.
Yeah, you're very successful.
And
That's right.
we've had a very good last 2 years, and I'm very proud of the organization, what it's done, what it means for the community. And to go back on things is you do actually find some culinary crossover at a lot of the stadiums.
You do actually, yeah.
It's not your traditional type things. I think back, one of the teams, Savannah, has one of my favorite things, the garbage can nachos, and they're literally served on a garbage can lid. And it's quite comical, but those are the things that you see at minor league ballparks and ballparks all over that engage fans.
And they also have like the great deals for the kids where it's like you pay $5 and you get you can eat from this table or things like that. And it's good food. It's like from a local barbecue space or something like that.
And we do that at our ballpark. We offer an all-you-can-eat ticket where you can come in and get your ticket included and all-you-can-eat food, and it's $18.
Right.
I mean, we look at that as saying,
about a night out. And when you have young kids, they don't know the difference because the baseball is high quality.
It is. I mean, we've had numerous kids drafted. We've had 7 kids from our organization that are in the big leagues now. One of the guys that'll be pitching probably in game 1 or 2 of the World Series, Justin Verlander, played in this league.
He played in the Coastal Plain League?
He did. He played the same year I did in 2002.
Was he the guy that ripped you off those? That wasn't
No,
the Coastal Plain League.
that was early on. But I'll never forget seeing Verlander, and he was 97, 98 in the Coastal Plain League. I mean, he could throw it with the best of them.
Before we get out, so how does it work? Like, how does a team get formed? It's because they're college kids, right? So they're non-professional, so they don't get paid.
Correct.
Do they get a stipend for the
so
season?
So what we do is we put them up in host families. So we find local families throughout the community that take these kids in, and they form great relationships. I'm still close with my host families when I played, and it's really special when you see kids go on to the next level. For instance, we had a first-round draft pick that signed for $7 million.
Oh, wow.
I mean, he's flown his family out to host family out to see him. One of them was the NLCS MVP with the Dodgers, Chris Taylor.
Yeah.
Chris played for us in Morehead City, and his host family, he brought them out for game 1 of the World Series the first time he made it. And those are the kind of relationships that you get to be built from these teams.
I bet there are a bunch of single ladies living on the East Coast, right, or on the coastline, going, I'll host a baseball player in my house for a season.
We do try to be a little specific to make sure that
family.
It's a family-friendly environment.
Come on.
But how do the teams get formed? Do they get drafted, or is it just like you scout around?
So each team is responsible for their own players. A lot of times it's done by the head coach. Sometimes it can be done by the general manager or the owner, depending upon the structure of the organization. Me with having a baseball background, I helped a lot with it. And then 2 years ago,
you're also the general manager.
Well, I actually have a GM, even though I sometimes have the title, but I've got a GM.
You're kind of like Jerry Jones in that sense.
Kind of a little bit of everything.
Still Al Davis,
We're jack of all trades, master of none. But I brought in a scouting director to help with players just because it was taking so much of my time, and with all the other things I had going on, I just didn't have the time to put into. Because it's, believe it or not, a very lengthy process to not just recruit kids, but keep in touch with them as change and turnover happens.
Yeah. To
be able to continue to find players, it's a very lengthy process.
Well, this is a good part to segue into your with all the other things that you do, because I could talk baseball all day, but the people that are listening to the show probably not so much. So, what are you got into the food and beverage business as well outside of doing what you do for the Marlins, and so how did that come about?
The story was really intriguing, and it's something that I've talked about quite a lot, and it really happened on December 23rd, 2011.
Oh, I love when there's a date, a red letter date.
I'll 6:30 in the morning.
Oh, wow.
I remember it to a T because I was living in Morehead City. My mom and sister were already in New York. We were heading there for Christmas. My father and I were on a 1 o'clock flight that afternoon, and my father called me and said, "I need you to come to New Bern." And when he said, "Dad, you okay?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm fine. Just come to New Bern." Well, we get to New Bern, and he owned a building that a restaurant was in. It had been there for about 7 or 8 years. And when I got there, I said, "Dad, what's wrong?" And he came inside, and there was a Dear John letter. The owner had just taken the stuff and left. Took product, took computers, said, "See you later." Wrote a Dear John letter to us, said, "I'm in debt over my head. I can't do it any longer." And 2 days before, didn't tell his staff, didn't tell anyone. And I felt so bad for those people, between the staff, the customers, people that had orders for Christmas. And like, I wanted to just go up in the bakery and start making things, but we couldn't touch things because it wasn't our asset. Mm-hmm. So we went through a lot of the legal process. He was behind in some rent to my father. We went through to make sure we could secure the building. We tried to sell the restaurant. Nobody would buy it. It was a breakfast lunch concept that had not really done very well. And finally, I looked at my parents and I said, look, at least if we have an income-producing asset, we could at least try to sell it. Let's bring some revenue in for 2-3 months, and then we'll sell the restaurant. I said, sure. I mean, I said, really, how hard can this be? It's just a restaurant.
Right.
Infamous last words of anybody in the restaurant business. So my family and I went in and opened up the restaurant. We changed the name from Baker's Square to Baker's Kitchen. We offered anyone that still worked there or that had worked there a job. We tried to keep some of the same concept, but we tried to put better business principles in place. And I had never really spent time in a kitchen. I worked in a dish room and a prep room as I think every 15, 16-year-old kid does.
Right.
But I didn't understand the real mechanics. And I was very fortunate. I had some friends that owned restaurants, and they sat me down and started teaching me some of the mechanics of it. But a lot of it was from reading articles online, watching YouTube videos, and just literally getting thrown in the kitchen from open to close and working a line and jumping right in there. And we opened it up and was very fortunate. The restaurant was about 70 seats and took it to where we increased traffic and started to build the reputation back, where it went from we were on a wait 1 day to 2 days to 3 days to 4 days. We were on a wait almost 7 days out of the week, which was phenomenal. We were able to expand it from 70 seats to 200 seats, where we are today. And we took it from when the restaurant had closed, they were doing roughly about 40 or 50,000 covers a year, to where this past year we did over 200,000 covers, open from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. And we've really increased a lot of the volume. We currently employ over 60 people in the restaurant now, and we're very proud of that. And we've become a staple in downtown and really eastern North Carolina for the spot to go for breakfast. And a lot of it was just simple business principles, and have been able to take that restaurant and expand it into 3 other restaurants doing the same type of thing. Found restaurants that were failing, that were closing, went in and took them over, made them profitable, and continue to operate them.
And they're all throughout New Bern?
They're all throughout New Bern. They're on 3 different blocks. We're actually down to 2 restaurants now. We've gotten rid of 2 of them. But Baker's Kitchen was one. And then the other story to me is just as important. And again, that happened back in February of 15. A gentleman that owned a brand called Beer Army. He's a retired United States Marine. And he started that brand as a quasi-memorial to his best friend that was killed in Ramadi, Iraq. And if you get a chance, go on YouTube, type in "What is Beer Army?" We did a video that talks about the brand. And his brand had some issues. It was the brewery, the bar were struggling. And when he told me that story, I didn't want that brand to go away. I thought it meant so much to the service members, and it really embodied the American dream of somebody who went to fought for our country. And wanted to come back and live an American dream. So I told him, I said, I got a great idea. I know how we're going to fix this. We're going to open up a restaurant, and we're going to save that brand. Mm-hmm. So today we have Beer Army Burger Company in downtown New Bern, and the place has been great. It's reviving the brand. It's bringing it back. It's getting out. We're now...
Do you brew your own beer there as well?
So the answer is yes and no. Okay. Not on site, but thanks to Governor McCrory, who signed contract brewing legislation, we're able to contract brew with other breweries utilizing the recipes of Beer Army.
Gotcha.
Now, it's eventually in our plan to open a brewery up and to expand things, but we haven't gotten there just yet.
This segment is brought to you by our brand new sponsor, the Folks Foundation. They are champions of all good things crafted in North Carolina and the folks that make them. And so for you, as a listener, you can sign up and become a member of the Folks Foundation. As a member, you are directly supporting makers, growers, crafters, and artisans of North Carolina, from the mountains to the sea. And when you support, you are benefiting handcrafted culture in our state that directly affects our lives every single day, from local products that we eat to the music and podcast production we listen to every day. But membership packages include a subscription to the Folks Journal, discounts to their general store, which has amazing products online, and access to exclusive content. So visit them at folksfoundation.org or check the link on our show notes in the podcast. That's the Folks Foundation. I'd be remiss if we didn't mention that one of our most listened to episodes we've ever done was last year when we did a Fayetteville Beer Trail episode. It was around Memorial Day.
Yeah.
And talked to veteran-owned breweries, and we got to hear stories of being enlisted and being in Iraq or being in Afghanistan, but then coming back and becoming entrepreneurs and making their own way. Also, we were kind of fascinated that once that episode went out, we had a crazy amount of people that downloaded that show, and because of the statistics we could see on our site, it was all in the Middle East. We had so many soldiers listening to our show about their brethren kind of doing the next thing. So hopefully, hey, to any of you soldiers that are like possibly listening today, props for what you're doing, and keep doing what you're doing. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And we do need more veteran-owned businesses, and we need to find ways to create capital for those guys, to give them access to capital. So when they come out of the armed services, they come out with a skill. Let's give them an opportunity to come in and start their own company to help contribute to the state of North Carolina, because there's a lot of veteran-owned businesses here, but we could always utilize more. And I'm proud the founder of Beer Army is a partner of mine today, and he's still part of the brand every single day. And we try to make sure that through our foundation, we're continuing to give back to service members and find ways to encourage them to start companies.
So as you can tell, Buddy is speaking very much like I wouldn't say like a politician. You're speaking like well-polished and thoughtful, saying thoughtful words. And we're going to get into why you're running for Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina. But before we do that, we have to tell you about our friends at Triangle Wine Company.
Yeah, man. Triangle Wine Company, who has 4 locations. If you listen to the show, you know that we love to boast about their locations out in Southern Pines, Morrisville, Cary, and in Matt's neck of the woods, Holly Springs. You can get wine, beer. You can sit down. You can have a glass of wine or a nice cold pint of beer, but anything else that you need too. And the best part, they deliver. They deliver to your house. You can order online at trianglewineco.com. And because you're friends of the show, you can put in the NCFB promo code, receive 10%, and have a great discount and have a great weekend going to Triangle Wine Company.
So, why go into politics? You got some successful restaurants, you're doing good in the community, you got your baseball team, and now you're going to deal with the headaches of politics.
Well, as I've joked to a couple of people, I said, you think politics is hard? You try running a restaurant.
Yeah.
You try getting on a line when there's 20 people on a wait, 2 people have called out, you've got 10 tickets there, your fryer just broke, and you got people angry, not to mention it's Mother's Day. That is pressure, and I think everyone in our industry understands exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to that. So I really look at this as going, it's not really as much pressure, but for me, it's about the next generation. I think we have to get the younger generation involved in politics, because right now, if we don't, I think we're in trouble. I really do. I think the younger generation needs to start to stand up, and specifically on the Republican side, we've got to start getting younger. We've got to start thinking outside the box, utilizing different innovative technology, using different things that maybe the Republican Party hasn't in the past. But I think there's so many similarities between owning and operating a restaurant and politics. There are so many similarities and efficiencies that we have one of the slimmest profit margins of any business. So we have a very thin margin for error. So we need to make sure that we're able to say, hey, we have to be efficient if we want to make money. We have to understand how to relate to people, how to make people happy who maybe aren't or having a bad day. Our job in the restaurant business is to create an experience for people, to make sure that they leave there happier than when they came. Because food makes people happy. They think about sitting around their grandmother's table Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon, having the whole family around. That's the experience that people will cherish for years and years. And to me, that's what's important, ways that we can help our state. When I look at things that are under fire in North Carolina right now, our 2 largest industries are agriculture and hospitality and tourism. And those 2 go hand in hand.
Yeah.
If our farmers aren't out there picking crops, aren't out raising livestock, our chefs aren't able to create these amazing things that they're doing. They're not able to do the things that make our restaurants move forward. We've got to stand up and protect those industries. We have to make sure that our state is continuing to grow. When you look at from a business standpoint, an economy standpoint, look at what we've done in the last 5 to 10 years from a craft beer standpoint, from a distillery standpoint, from a food standpoint. there are some amazing chefs that are coming to North Carolina that haven't been in the past. Our state is growing, and I truly believe our industry is one of the main reasons for that.
Yeah.
We need somebody that will be able to advocate not just for our industry, but for businesses like that to continue to make our state grow in a positive manner.
It's funny. Sorry, I was going to validate you by saying, I think most people that listen to our show know that Max and I pretty much lean to the left or get pretty far left. But and I think a lot of people, and I could be wrong about this, but a lot of people that listen to our show kind of are in the same vibe, at least in the Triangle area. But the fact that you're a Republican doesn't mean, one, we haven't given you our endorsement, but we've given you a platform.
Matt, you're dancing over here.
No, but what I like is I think you probably want, or at least perked a lot of people's interest by making your platform geared towards those in hospitality.
Absolutely, because that's something I've grown to love. I love this business. I love what it does. To me, I love walking into the restaurant and seeing a complete stranger stop me and say, that was the best meal I've ever had. Or that server made my day, because that server may have come over and said happy birthday when nobody else knew about it. Those are the things that bring joy to our industry. And that, to me, is what we need to talk about more often. We need to talk about the way that we can grow and build it, because that's what's growing our state right now. And I'm all for sound business principles that make our state better. I want to be able to create and advocate to give capital to entrepreneurs that want to be able to go out and expand their business. I look at my business through Bakers, and we've looked at expanding now. One of the things, and I didn't bring it to you guys, but Max, I've talked to you a little bit about it. It's called butter syrup. And it's one of the staples in our restaurant. We've created our own syrup. There's no maple syrup in it, just butter syrup. And it's really grown and went to the point where we did our first run last year in December. We sold about 2,000 units in 18 days. Wow. I mean, people flooded the restaurant when I had it in there. And we've gone back for some R&D. We've made some changes to the product. We're getting ready. I think next week we're running our second round of things with it, and we'll have it back in stock here shortly. But those are the type of things that I want to look to expand in our state and create those type of opportunities.
Well, and Matt, not to make you fall over in your chair or anything, but I feel like maybe in my old age or so, I've become much more of a moderate or to the center of all of my political views and standings, in that I just want things to get done and I want logic to prevail. I think I just don't associate with any political party. I just look at people and just say, is this person going to help take us to the next level? With all that said, what the hell is a lieutenant governor? Because I don't even know what you would do. And what does a lieutenant governor do? And why should we not just vote for you, but why should we care who the lieutenant governor is?
So I'll answer the two or threefold question you have in there. So the lieutenant governor statutorily serves at the pleasure of the governor. Now, we're in a unique situation right now in North Carolina where we have a Democrat governor and a Republican lieutenant governor. One of your chief duties as the lieutenant governor is you preside over the Senate. You do not have a vote in the Senate unless there is a tie. You also serve on numerous boards and commissions.
Kind of Speaker of the House-ish?
Not really.
Okay.
The Speaker determines your agenda. The Speaker can move bills. The Speaker can vote.
Okay.
The Speaker is elected by the body.
Right, okay.
Versus, that's more of the President pro tem of the Senate, is more like the Speaker. It's more of a ceremonial position, which is one of the reasons I was really attracted to it, because you have a bully pulpit. You have media. You have the ability to speak on issues and advocate on issues that matter. I can wake up today and say, you know what? We're going to talk about alcohol reform in the state of North Carolina today, and I have the media to do it. We're going to talk about our agriculture industry. We're going to talk about something new coming up, and I have the platform to do it. That's why, to me, it's almost like a king of entrepreneurial positions, because you don't really necessarily have a set legislative agenda. You create it.
Do you need to be in the Senate every day, though?
You don't have
while
to.
It's
no,
in. Okay.
You don't have to be. Other people can preside over the Senate while you're gone. So you realistically, like an entrepreneur, have an opportunity to create and advocate for whatever it is that you want to. So if today we want to talk about business, tomorrow we want to talk about education, we can do that. And that's why it was so intriguing to me when I saw the opportunity of saying, well, this is what we do. We create things. And I look at the alcohol legislation. I know the Restaurant Association has been a big advocate for that. I think that's an issue that if we're going to start moving our state forward, that's an issue I would like to see changed. I would like to see us move a little bit forward because it helps us as restaurateurs understand and make things a little easier for our companies by having some reform when it comes to ABC.
So some hard questions here. Would you push forward to abolish the control state for alcohol, or would you like to keep it where it's at?
I think we need serious reform in ABC. And I think there's a couple of different ways. And I think that we need to fully think everything out to make sure things are going. Now, if we're going to abolish it, we need to look and say, okay, well, how do we make sure that every 3 steps there's not a liquor store? Is there X amount of alcohol licenses? How are they properly distributed?
Yeah.
How do we make sure? So I think there's some things that need to quote unquote get worked out before we can come out and say, yes, I'm 100%. But the metrics on the back end, I personally am a capitalistic society guy. I believe the free market, let it dictate things. Mm-hmm. I think it can dictate price. I also believe that we may end up getting better quality bourbon, better quality whiskey, getting things in here that we might not normally get because you may only get X amount for sales that may go to the state, that may distribute it in other places, that small rural economies like New Bern may not have the same opportunity to get the same bourbon selection that you get here in Wake County.
Yeah. It's not bringing out their private reserve in North Carolina because we're not a major entity for them, because we're not sexy to them because we're a control state.
Correct. So understanding that, but I also look at saying it's a huge weekend down in Carteret County and you've got a bar that's going to be ramped up for 3 straight days, Memorial Day weekend. You now have to send one of your employees in a truck for a $10,000 liquor order to the liquor store to load that in the truck with a cashier's check. God forbid something happens on the way then and there.
Yeah.
To me, I think that's an issue. I think that puts more liability on us as business owners when I think it should be, in essence, on the other side. I also think that there are some other areas, including being able to pay on terms with alcohol. I mean,
you should be able to. So, like in California, if you wanted to open up a bar, you could literally just have no money, and on credit, you have 30 days to pay. You could buy all the booze that you want to buy and make your money literally on the sales you do that month. Now, that's not the greatest idea to do, but I've known as a former distributor for 7 years in California that many places I knew had like maybe $5,000 in the bank and they opened their bar. But they're like, that's fine because we just bought all this. We bought, $15,000 worth of booze on credit, but we're working a 25% margin or an 18% margin. So if we sell it all, we'll be great. I'm like, yeah, there's a huge word that you put in there, which was if. And so if you're not busy, you're screwed and you've got nothing there. So there is some sort of protection that we have in a state where it is government run in alcohol, where it will protect kind of the careless entrepreneur. It also is going to protect the small distiller that is essentially protected because the big guys, the Diageos and the Constellations, aren't really coming in and swinging their hammers and knocking everybody else out by buying refrigeration units for this bar and putting a corporate card down for this weekend and spending $4,000 at this restaurant just because. All that stuff can happen, but in a control state, the big companies like Southern and all are just biding their time. They're like, we're just going to wait. And once it opens up, we're going to pounce and hit hard. And so sadly, to some of these upstart companies that Matt and I have had on the show many times before, could potentially be in jeopardy of even being in business after that happens.
Well, and when you look at, for me, I think it's a discussion that needs to be had. And I think we need to look at vetting it completely from a business standpoint. We need to look at what is good for our businesses here. What is good to help our industry grow? I look at what we did, 2 years ago with the brunch bill?
Yeah.
That was outstanding. I mean, my business at one of my restaurants shot up almost 200% just from going from 12 to 10.
Yeah, you're a breakfast restaurant. So
this is well, for those that don't know, the brunch bill 2 years ago passed. It allowed alcohol sales to happen on Sunday from noon up to 10 a.m. We added 2 hours on Sunday so you could actually start buying and selling alcohol at that time. But with that said, we also snuck in a couple other things to the brunch bill, which allowed distillers to go from one sale of bottle in a calendar year for any one person at their location to 5 bottles. And then with the SB 290 bill that passed this year, did away with all of that. And now you can buy however many amounts of bottles you want from any distiller in any time of day.
And you can also taste that spirit now at the distillery.
And distillers
Correct.
can now have open liquor on-premise laws or licenses, so they can essentially be a bar and sell cocktails at their distilleries.
And those are things that help restaurateurs and help our industry.
Well,
that
and also help infuse money into our state. I mean, there's no
absolutely,
question about it.
because we're still paying sales tax on that.
Right.
People come in and buy that drink, they're still making their money on that. So to me, we have to look at this as a business case. And to me, that's the way I look at my campaign. This is a business case. We need to look at business issues in North Carolina and figure out how we can make our state more business friendly. And we've done a great job in the last 10 years of becoming one of the better states, but we still have some room for improvement. And I really appreciate the Restaurant Lodging Association. They've done a great job with advocating on behalf of our industry, and I think they continue to do that.
Have they endorsed you?
I'll be honest with you, they have not endorsed me, but I expect it to be coming
imminently.
The NCRLA are good friends of the state. They're good ambassadors of the state, and we work with them all the time. But we talked about farming, and you talked about farming too. That's a major aspect of our economy. And, there's so many different things we can talk about with you right now as being a lieutenant governor, but I think we're going to focus on food and beverage because that's our wheelhouse. So I want to know, though, are there any plans or things that are on the horizon that you would be a proponent of, bills or thoughts that would really help the small farmer? Because that could easily be just as bad as the big Diageo liquor companies coming in and taking away by basically putting the foot on the neck of small farmers, which is essentially kind of where a lot of small farms are dealing with at this point.
Sure. And a lot of it is really deregulation, allowing us to be able to compete with foreign countries, for instance. When you start to look at regulations that we have to deal with here in America versus, say, Mexico, say other countries that are bringing products in that our farmers are competing against. When you look at the sweet potato industry, you look at the tomato industry here in North Carolina, a lot of times they're competing against places in Mexico that have cheaper labor, that don't have the restrictions that companies here in America do. So we need to look and say, how can we make sure that our farmers can compete? Because I don't want to look at that sweet potato and see grown in Mexico. I'd rather see grown right here in North Carolina, because we do have a large sweet potato population here in North Carolina. It's been very good.
If it's not available, so if you can't get it here, I think it's okay to buy those things. But if it's available,
sure.
I don't know, but is that?
But when
do we
you
want regulation like that too? Like, do you want to tell and force chefs like you have to buy local?
I don't think the government should tell you have to do anything. I think the government should get out of our way personally. But I also look at how that farmer, that sweet potato farmer, can compete with the Walmarts of the world, with the major retailers, the Harris Teeters, because that's where they can move a lot of their volume. We as restaurants buy a good amount of volume, but grocery stores run through a significantly higher amount of volume than we run through. And that to me is where I say we need to make sure that they can compete, that they're on the same and the playing field is level.
So how do you do that?
To me, it's helping, again, with regulations. So if you're bringing something in, whether it's from Mexico or from North Carolina, making sure they're playing on the same field.
Yeah.
Don't go in and say, okay, our farmers in North Carolina have to meet A, B, C, D regulations, but coming from Mexico, you don't know what's being grown into that food. You don't know what type of treatment that food has undergone, how it was grown, what the soil looked like. That, to me, is how we have to start to do that.
But how do you do that with other countries? Like, how do you force them to? Because then otherwise it would be our manpower going there to inspect their farms and then either validating or not validating the regulation.
With so many diseases now, we need to know where our food comes from anyway, so we can start to trace things back. God forbid there's an outbreak. I mean, we've seen too many cases now in the restaurant business where there's been outbreaks and people have gotten severely sick, even deathly. So we need to know where our food is being able to come from, being able to trace back, whether that's through the federal government, whether that's through our state government. I'm not 100% sure how I would tell you on that.
Okay.
And I may just say, not serve octopus. I mean, just
hey, kids, come on. I mean,
yeah. But have you been to the Cortez and had their pulpo? Come on.
No, but here's what I'll tell you, and this is an interesting fact with me. I eat like a 3-year-old. Which is quite comical being in the restaurant business.
You also run breakfast and lunch restaurants. So
I would eat like a 3-year-old anyway. It's quite comical, and it's one of my largest fears is going to these dinners where you don't know what they're serving. That's the scariest thing on earth to me.
Yeah. But just to get back to this regulation and stuff, because, there's a huge controversy right now. Obviously, there's tariffs going on with lots of Spanish, German, and French products. And specifically, one that affects my business and a lot of other people is the tariffs on wine. So any wine that is under 14% alcohol coming into this country from Spain, Germany, or France is going to be significantly more money. And that's across the board. It doesn't matter who you're getting it from. Nobody's eating that cost and that's going to be passed on directly to the consumer. And the consumer is getting screwed because it's 3 times. Now, I'm a huge proponent of local. I would love for there to be great North Carolina wine, which people say, okay, this is great. We've talked about it. There are some. Like, how do we regulate that? Because, if you want to get octopus, I guess you can have avocados grown in California, but predominantly they're in Mexico. And, so because then people are going to be like, let's say the equivalent, okay, all of a sudden an avocado costs me $10. That's not a good thing either.
Well, and you start to look at saying we need to make sure that we're taking care of American companies.
Right.
We're looking out for American, and there's a lot of really good, as you will. California, Oregon, Washington have done a phenomenal job with building their wine portfolios in the last few years. I mean, you get into the new world versus old world discussion on things, and I understand where people are getting upset saying, okay, I'm paying a higher price now for Spanish wines. However, have we looked in making sure that we're taking care of people in our backyard first?
Yeah.
Are we looking? And I understand that people have preference, and I say if you want that preference, that's great. You may have to pay a premium. You may have to pay a premium for that because I would rather tell you to pay a premium for that and be able to make sure we can keep that winery that's here in Duplin County in business.
Yeah.
We can keep them functioning because that may be the difference between a restaurateur saying, okay, that bottle of wine is $9 normally, or it's $15 for the Spanish wine. Okay, I may take the $9 for my house wine because I can get a little bit better margin out of that. And it may keep somebody here in North Carolina in business versus them saying, okay, it talks about that level playing field. I understand where they're coming from on that, but that to me
I'll
is
also be the devil's advocate on there. You got to make really good wine to compete in a world market. And because wine is so easily accessible everywhere, in the end, like, you could be righteous enough to say you want to shop local, but do you want to not have the Sancerre because you want to have Sauvignon Blanc grown in Yadkin Valley? Like, no, you're going to get the Sancerre because it's the highest quality Sauv Blanc you can find in the world. So, like, at some point, you're getting what you want because you want it, and because it's a world economy now, you can get wherever you want. So I know,
and we're not saying it's not available, but if you're someone who's drinking that type of wine, you don't mind paying a little bit extra for that.
That Sancerre is going to be
because
$20 a bottle as opposed to something from Yadkin. Well, I don't know, because North Carolina wine's not cheap either.
Right.
No.
That's the other thing, too. So many times you can find a really great Spanish wine, like Matt's talking about, for way less. And arguably, and this is just an opinion of mine, could possibly be a better quality wine, too.
I don't know if I want to get between you two in a wine argument.
I propose what we do is maybe suggest what the Canadians do when it comes to music. Are you aware of this? That
I'm not.
Canadian broadcasting laws state to keep the culture of, because they're right next door to America, and the U.S. is their biggest export is entertainment. Canadian laws state that on the radio and on television that 35% of all music played in a week needs to be of Canadian-born content.
That's a lot of bare naked ladies playing.
Bryan Adams, Rush, and
Shania
Celine Dion.
Twain.
Yeah, I mean, if you get deep into it, it's not so bad. But yeah, I mean, like, basically, they're like, look, you can do whatever you want, but you do have to stay home for some of this stuff, and maybe that creates some pride in your local area. So, like, I don't know, maybe at the end of the year, your receipts need to your farming receipts or your produce receipts need to account up to at least 35% of locally purchased food and beverage. I don't know,
but it also goes back to I don't like the government telling us what to do.
Exactly.
I mean, and that's where you get into that issue of let the free market decide. I mean, if that's where it is, then just let the free market and the capitalistic society take care of itself.
Just because you're making it doesn't mean we have to buy it.
Correct.
Yeah.
And like you said, it may be good, but if I want that higher end, I mean, I favor Italian wines. I lived over there for 2.5 years, and
I don't think you'll be affected then for some reason. I'm not sure why the Italians aren't included in that whole thing. But, yeah. Well, anyway, just I want to get onto one more subject before we run out of time. And indirectly falls into the culinary world, but what's your stance on cannabis and cannabis farming as for an agricultural product?
To me, I think we need to do more research.
Okay.
I'm not ready to tell you I have a firm stance on it yet because I don't think the research is there. I think that there are some indications of what it can do for an economy, but I also think there's positives and negatives to it.
Okay.
I think we need to make sure we understand how to control it. And when I say how to control it, to make sure that you don't go out, somebody grows it, and I'll say smokable versus non-smokable. To me, when you start to get into the smokable, we have to know how to control it. We have to know to make sure that if you go out and you smoke, that you're not going to be, and you get behind the wheel of a car, that you're not going to be a danger to somebody else. And I think until we can start to do that and we have more research on it, I'm not ready to jump on either one. Now, when we start looking, and to me, I also think there's a law enforcement issue that comes with that. They've spent a lot of money training dogs, training their staff, and I think there's such close balance between where you've got smokable hemp versus marijuana. I think that's a very difficult situation right now. When it comes to some of the oils, some of the rope, some other clothing, I think it does present a viable case for our economy, for our farmers here in North Carolina. But I still think we've got a little bit more research to do on it before we can jump in and take a firm stance, at least from my standpoint.
Sure. So for farming purposes, for like possibly CBD, all those type of things.
Yeah, the wellness-based products.
Yeah, I think the regulation in most of the states where it's legal for recreational purposes follow almost all the same rules and regulations as alcohol. I mean, if you're high, you don't get behind the wheel of a car. Just like if you're drunk, you don't get behind the wheel of a car unless you're going to face the.
But it's just like alcohol and everything. It affects you different than it does me. It affects a 100-pound female versus a 250-pound male. And that's where I think we have to understand what that control is and what you deem, okay, I can have 2 drinks and you're fine to drive versus somebody that never drank before. They have 2 drinks. They probably should barely walk.
Right. Yeah, that's true. And the unfortunate part is like we had Nick Sagan from Flat River Infusions on who does CBD oils and all. They really are just not doing any of this research at all. There's no funding really like federally and statewide to really do enough funding or to do enough research to then educate the public and have us have informed decisions as to making these decisions. So until we start putting money into research, we'll never know. So maybe that's like the first step is we should start funding research to do that.
As I think with anything, we have to know what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And we have to understand the effects. We need to make sure so that we don't jump into a decision on something and then have to come back 3 years later when we say that could have been prevented by us doing research on it. We need to make sure we understand what we're getting ourselves into.
Yeah, I just think that personally, for the especially in the wellness space, the CBD oils, all the non-marijuana hemp or cannabis out there, it seems to me to be such a no-brainer, especially for our rural economies that were huge tobacco farms in this state. That those farms have been devastated, or it's taken decades for those people to get back on their feet and find other jobs. And this would be such a natural transfer to go from tobacco farming to cannabis farming.
And like I said, I'm open to the exploration, and to looking at it. And if it's good from the business and the economy standpoint,
sure,
then let's look at it. But let's make sure we know the effects of what it can do, and then what we allow and what we don't allow. From that standpoint.
Get ready, man. This is
going to come at you. Yeah,
you're going to get like questions like way harder than what
I'm
we're
sure
pressing.
You're ready. Well, that actually do have a question, and not to get back on the which side of the fence you're on, and just for the record, I'm actually a registered independent. Just for the record, so I let the best person for the job get the job. I strongly believe that. So, but strategically, so I didn't realize. This is how informed I am, that there is currently a Republican lieutenant governor. So you will be running against an incumbent to get in the primary. Is that it?
No. Our current lieutenant governor is running for governor. So as the lieutenant governor, you're only allowed 2 4-year terms.
Okay. And then
this is his second 4-year term. Okay. So it will be an open seat.
Gotcha.
So does this also then imply that you have your sights in the future to possibly be the governor? Like if things ran its course?
To me, if I can create opportunities and be successful in what I want to do and to advocate for successful things, sure, I'd be open to being governor. I'd be open to any possibility that would enable me to further the cause of what we want to get done. If we're successful at things, why would I say no to something?
Yeah.
It's an opportunity to help make people's lives better. And for me, a lot of that came from when Hurricane Florence came and devastated eastern North Carolina. That was something that was important to me, to go out and be able to help people that didn't have a hot meal, that needed a home. Those are important things. And if we create our mission to make North Carolina a better state, then yeah, I'll look at any opportunity that comes next. I mean, it might be going back to cleaning toilets at the restaurant, or it might be running to the governor's mansion. Who knows?
So Buddy Bengel for governor 2028. That would be when that would be. But let's talk about realistic stuff right now, at least. Voting doesn't start, and to vote for lieutenant governor is March 3rd?
March 3rd is the election date right now.
That's for the Republican primary?
For all primaries.
Oh, for all primaries.
So you'll have Republican and Democrat primaries, obviously on both sides of this office as well as others, including the Democratic presidential candidate will be decided here.
And obviously that sounds like it's far away, but as we were talking about even before the show started, it's like, everybody listening, this is like where you should start paying attention to what's going to happen to the state government officials, and it's all happening in March.
Absolutely. It's getting people involved, getting people to pay attention. I mean, our most precious right is our right to vote. We have a right to choose our leaders, and thank God we live in the greatest country on God's green earth, where if you want to run for office, I encourage you to run. Get out and talk about your platform. Worst case, if you lose, you spent that much time talking about your message, getting your message out there, getting people exposed to something they may not have been in the past. And to me, it's a great opportunity to get out to exercise our right to run for office, but most importantly, to vote. So I encourage, whether you're Republican, Democrat, unaffiliated, independent, whatever party, get out and exercise your right to vote.
Yeah, and you don't need a 500 batting average to qualify, but it doesn't hurt.
Thank God.
And buddy, before you get out of here, I know we just had this crazy conversation about alcohol and all these other things, but we also have ice cream that has alcohol inside it. It's called Proof Alcohol Ice Cream, and all the guests of our show go home with some Proof Alcohol Ice Cream. Think differently about dessert. You get 7% ABV in any one pint of ice cream. So maybe we'll send you on your way with some Mocha Chocolate Moonshine, because Moonshine has been doing so well in the East North Carolina area where you hail. Again, thank you for being on the show.
Thank y'all.
Thanks, buddy. Good luck. If you didn't listen or learn anything today, learn to vote. It will make your food and drink taste better. You'll eat and drink very merrily.
Thanks for listening to the NC F&B podcast. And if you've stuck with us this long, review us on iTunes, and remember, 5 stars are encouraged.